Hi, this is Mete Yurtsever. I'm the host of the Formula for Creating Value podcast. The show is actually in Turkish, as you would have noticed from the title, but I occasionally host foreign experts and therefore record sessions in English, and later I record a summary in Turkish. I'm based in Istanbul, I'm a consultant, and I'm on a mission to transform the way the businesses create value. In my podcast, I talk with my guests or alone about topics like human-centric marketing, innovation, behavioral economics, and I advocate that creating value can only be achieved through design thinking. Today, I have a great pleasure to host Coonoor Behal from Seattle, owner of Mindhatch. I'll introduce her during the interview in a second, and you can also find detailed info about her in show notes. So let's move on to the interview. Coonoor, it's a great pleasure to have you in my podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a quick introduction how our paths crossed, right? So I was listening to a podcast where you were a guest, this Sherpa's Guide to Innovation, and the conversation resonated with me a lot. I mean, I've checked your website, my excitement grew further, and I decided to drop you a line saying that how your authentic style inspired me, and I asked your recommendation for reading. Well, honestly, in podcasts, you were sounding like a kind, amiable person, but you never know. I mean, people will answer or not. But so beyond my expectation, you said, why don't we have a chat and send me a couple of calendar options to pick from? And I was ecstatic. And we had a very nice chat. That was back in March. And since then, I started to read more about improv. I couldn't find much about specifically improv, but I found out about this creative drama. And I started this long journey of certification. I finished the second, let's say, semester. And when I was starting this podcast show, I wanted to introduce you to Turkish business community. And I'm sure more people will get inspiration from you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope so. I kind of invented my own job, as I think most entrepreneurs end up doing. So I'm forever an evangelist for what I do and the value it brings. So thank you so much for wanting to chat.
Thank you. So actually, I know you studied product design at Wharton School of Business, but what was your major in New York University?
Oh yeah, so I have a very varied academic and career history. So actually, in college, I graduated with a bachelor's of journalism, and I had two minors. One was politics, and one was cinema studies. Throughout college, I actually wanted to work in the entertainment industry. So kind of doing broadcast journalism was a little bit of like a backup for that. And then I went to graduate school where I studied international relations, and that kind of launched me into my first career, which was working in international nonprofit development. And so then the product design course that I took at Wharton was many years later when I was first getting interested in design thinking, and I happened to be living in Washington, D.C., and this was maybe, 8 years ago. And there were literally no formal design thinking training programs within hundreds of miles of me where I was living. And so I really, really took advantage of any kind of online courses I could take, anything that was self-directed, gathered up groups on my own to like take classes together. And so one of the most formative ones of those courses that I took was this product design course at Wharton, which was done online. And it was just amazing. It just made me fall in love with what I do now.
Great. So how do you describe what you do now? I mean, a consultant, a facilitator?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like I have endless conversations about what I call myself with also other consultants and other people like me. Where we're like, "What do you call yourself?" And so I think consultant to me is accurate in the sense that I hope it conveys that I work with many different clients, rather than just one. But I think more often than not, I call myself kind of like an innovation and creativity expert. So sometimes the way I deliver that work looks like consulting. Sometimes it looks more like facilitation. Sometimes it looks more like training and kind of knowledge transfer. But yeah, I think the most generic way I call myself is a innovation and creativity consultant.
Okay, so we'll come to all these details, but
Sure.
how it's occurred to you that you can get use of your personal hobby, improv, at work?
Yeah, well, it really it was kind of the luck of just timing that made me realized that the improv I was doing might have some bearing on my work. So this again, it's about 8, 9 years ago. I started to take my first improv class in
Hmm.
Washington D.C. It was something I had long wanted to do ever since college, and had so much regret over not doing it in college. And so years
Uh,
later, I thought, okay, screw it, I'm just going to do it, And so I signed up for an improv class, and actually the reason why I was even able to sign up for it was because I had gotten a project at my old consulting firm that was an innovation project, but it was also 100% remote. So
mhm,
basically, one of the motivating factors for me to sign up for this improv class was that I no longer had a 2 hour round trip commute every day. I could
mhm,
work from home. And so I thought, okay,
uh-huh,
that's a lot of extra time in the week. Let me finally tackle this regret that I've had for such a long time. And
uh-huh,
I happened to, like, in the same month, start taking improv classes. And I also, in the same month, started working in my first role in innovation, and started learning about human centered design and design thinking and creative facilitation. And so I was literally learning the fundamentals of both simultaneously, and
mhm,
really saw firsthand how similar they were, how the mindsets were nearly identical, how some of the language around facilitating and achieving innovation and how you set the conditions for innovation were nearly identical to how you set the conditions for good improv, and kind of the
mhm,
mindsets and skills that improvisers need to train to be good at. So I really kind of saw the linkages firsthand there. And then I think the other benefit of timing was that I happened to be working at a large management consulting firm, and people at work started to learn that I was doing improv for fun, just after
mhm,
hours. And it was they who came to me and said, "Hey, listen, I've been reading for a few years in Harvard Business Review and Forbes and all these things that I read, that improv can be really helpful to business and to the workplace. Will you come, do a session for my client team?" And
mhm.
so that's why timing and kismet and all of that happened, was because it was my colleagues who really showed me and proved to me that, like, okay, yes, there's application here, and really helped me start to practice it internally at the company.
Nice. So
Mhm.
that was Deloitte, right?
That was
Uh,
Deloitte. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. And how different it is to work on strategy and innovation in a big firm like Deloitte and your own boutique agency. I don't know how to
Mhm.
correctly name it. Mindhatch. I mean, like, how do you call it? Is it design?
Mindhatch. Hmm.
No, no. I mean, but
Oh.
how do you, like, boutique agency, or how do you call it? I mean, like, it's a,
Oh, yeah, yeah. It is very boutique. Yes.
yeah.
It's a small company. But yeah, I think in terms of how, because I'm small, with that comes equal parts like nimbleness, but then also some things on the inside of the business, like maybe I wanted to achieve 2 years ago, but being just one person, it's hard to tackle
Uh-huh.
everything at one time. But in terms of how I deliver for clients, I would definitely say it does feel very different, than
Mhm,
when I was at Deloitte. And then of course, in the years since I left Deloitte, they have changed a lot as well, so what I'm
mhm,
going to say now might be out of date, but my experience when I was at Deloitte and doing innovation and strategy work, was that there was always kind of a clear path, a framework, if you will, like a propensity to kind of claim, oh, this has been done before, or we've done it all the time and is
mhm,
successful.
mhm,
And I think working in a small boutique company like Mindhatch now, what that gives me the liberty to do is to really, like, put a stake in the ground and be proud of the fact that, hey, listen, 90% or more of our work is customized to our
mhm,
clients, and I
mhm.
really believe that it should be customized,
Right.
for me, when I'm speaking to a potential client, honestly, if someone asks me for a off the shelf solution or even for like a framework, to me that's a little bit of a red flag that like, oh, okay, you don't really want innovation. You
Okay.
because
Yeah.
if you're asking for something that has already been done a dozen times before, ostensibly for your competitors,
Yeah.
like, that's not innovation, so I quite pride myself on being small, and because of that, being able to be selective, but then also being able to really, really understand, the client's challenges,
Hmm.
and every time apply what it is that I know, to their particular challenge. So no
Hmm.
one engagement or looks the same as another. Whereas I
Right.
think when you're working for a larger company, and this is like across the board, not specific to Deloitte, you do tend to get I would, maybe pressured or encouraged to kind of like do the same things over and over again in the
Hmm.
name of quote unquote scaling
Right.
or
Hmm.
branding, if you will. So
Hmm.
I'd say that's kind of the biggest difference that comes to mind is just a little bit more flexibility and liberty to kind of like really tackle a problem as opposed
Right.
to just apply the solution that you already have.
Right. Some companies are not ready to embrace the uncertainty, all this uncertainty, which is actually in the nature of innovation, right? So you need to,
Yeah.
but yeah, some still are looking for some structure, as you say. I mean, some, yeah. But you work with also like Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, as well as U.S. Department of State, right? This is
Yes.
it's you have
Yeah.
like it's not like you're not working with the big blue chips, whatever. So,
Yeah.
uh, and how is it actually Department of State, as we call it, like Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like in Europe, right?
Uh-huh.
But you call
Yeah.
it Department of State. So that's quite a wide range. I mean, like it's that shows that actually what you do can be applied for every sector, for every business.
Yeah, no, thank you for noticing that because that's exactly what I feel most proud of in the fact of how eclectic my client list is. What you happen to name off some very recognizable clients, but I'm
Right.
also equally proud of the less recognizable clients
Sure.
that represent different sectors. And I think you're spot on in terms of how I feel about it. I think it is so diverse because across all the work that I do, it's always about like a group of people coming together to create something bigger than themselves.
Hmm.
And it's about kind of like harnessing the power of creativity that only human beings can have. And whether it's through design thinking or it's with improv or it's my facilitation work, that tends to be the common thread through everything. And so I really do feel like whenever you're presented with a group that is trying to achieve something greater than themselves,
Hmm.
which is by definition sector and industry agnostic. That's why we do anything that we do in the workplace. I think
Hmm.
the things that I do are very, very applicable. Yeah.
Hmm. Great. So you just mentioned actually your three major line of activity, right?
Uh-huh.
The design thinking, organizational improv, and the innovation facilitation.
Yeah.
So I'd like to begin with to focus on the first one, the third one, uh, design thinking and innovation facilitation.
Uh-huh.
In design thinking, I suppose you also facilitate sessions, right?
I do. Hmm.
And how do they differ from innovation facilitation? Because I think you also benefit from the design thinking principles in innovation.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good question. So, there are kind of two distinct kind of, services or methodologies, like in terms of how I present Mindhatch. Because when I'm doing design thinking work, it even if I'm doing kind of consultative work, like say I'm working with a client for like 3 to 6 months, and I'm helping them
Hmm.
execute, the process and do the customer research and develop concepts and so on. Even in consultative engagements like that, there are always needs for facilitating a group through something. So there might be milestone workshops or sessions like an ideation session or like a
Hmm.
concept development session
Hmm.
or synthesizing the data, and there's always some facilitative skill that is needed in that space. And whenever I'm acting as a design strategist or design researcher or both, that's often like on my shoulders to kind of guide a group through those milestone moments in a
Hmm.
facilitated way. So I
Hmm.
think the facilitation skill I definitely use in all of my work. So,
Right.
and design thinking work, of course, requires a lot of that facilitative kind of mindset, and guiding your team along the way. And then the innovation facilitation piece is a little bit more, I guess I could say specific, but like the innovation facilitation piece can be delivered in the absence of a design thinking process.
Uh-huh.
So, for
Okay.
example, this year I delivered two ideation workshops for a client in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and that was their need. They weren't working on human centered design. They weren't working on a design thinking process. What they really needed and were struggling with was coming up with more and better ideas, and then
Mhm.
also figuring out what to do with those ideas when they had them. And
Mhm.
so that was
Mhm.
a very kind of discrete facilitation experience that I designed and delivered for them.
Mhm.
That was not necessarily a part of a design thinking approach.
Okay, but it comprised the prototyping and testing of those, right? The ideas.
Those ideation sessions that I ran did not. They
Uh-huh.
certainly
Okay.
can. So
I
so
see.
even if a client were to come to me and say, "Hey, we need a day-long session developing prototypes." Yes, I can
Mhm.
absolutely design and deliver that. For sure. And it may or may not be a part of a human-centered design process. So I think the innovation facilitation piece, can encompass any type of session where you're trying to achieve creativity and group consensus on something. So, an
Okay.
ideation session is just one of many of those types of creative sessions that
Sure.
can happen. Mhm.
And do you facilitate alone? I mean, who else is in the room other than the client? I mean.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. So whether I facilitate alone or not depends on a couple of levers. One is how many people are part of the group. So generally speaking, if there's more than a group of 20 people, I do like to have a co-facilitator.
Mhm.
So, for example, the two sessions I mentioned that I ran in North Carolina this year, I brought one of my favorite co-facilitators with me to
Mhm.
design and deliver that alongside me. It was a larger group and a longer session, and so those factors always are helped by having another person, to facilitate with. So it really varies, just based on the particular scope of each session, whether I facilitate solo or
Mhm.
or I bring on anywhere from 1 to 4 additional facilitators.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, organizational improv. I mean, this was something new to me, and now I think I understand better. But can you
Mhm.
tell our audience? I mean, what is the difference between improv and organizational improv?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd be so happy to. So for me, improv, kind of standalone improv, improvisational comedy or improvisational theater. The goal of that, the expected and desired output of that is performance, right?
Okay.
So for example, when I rehearse with my improv teams here, we are rehearsing with the goal of doing a performance.
Hmm.
And then organizational improv is like the Mindhatch term for applying the skills and the mindsets and principles and behaviors of improvisational comedy to the workplace.
Hmm.
So, organizational improv is what I and Mindhatch call it. In other places, it's called applied improv. That's actually the
Hmm.
name of like the professional association that I belong to. And
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
applied improv is basically applying improvisational skills and tools to anything that is not performance based.
Hmm.
So you have people applying improv to disaster and crisis relief and preparedness, applying it to medical training, and then, for Mindhatch, for the most part, we are applying it in kind of organizational settings.
Right.
So that's why we call it organizational improv. So that's really the difference between kind of my improv performance life and then
Hmm.
my organizational improv kind of professional life.
Right. But then I'm sure some people are still feeling maybe anxious when they hear about improv. How do you deal with the misconceptions? I mean, like people are terrified, or some don't find it easy to do it, or.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's totally understandable that some people might be terrified of it. I mean, to be honest with you, that was why I didn't take an improv class in college because I was scared of being bad
Okay.
at it, and
Yeah.
but that resulted in a lot of regret for me and later in my life, and I'm so happy I got over it. So I definitely come at it from like a very empathetic standpoint of like, yes, improv as a performance pursuit is hard, like I remember when I once told my aunt about my improv performance,
Hmm.
I told her, well, my team gets on stage, we ask the audience for a one word suggestion, and based only on that suggestion, we do a 30-minute show where we're creating characters on the spot, we're creating
Hmm.
stories on the spot, and
Hmm.
it's all also happens to be funny.
Hmm.
And she was like, why the hell would anyone ever do that? Was her response, And so and that was a very, I think, rational response, because it's very hard. It's a very
Right.
hard thing to do well.
Yeah.
People spend decades getting better at it and better at it.
Sure.
So that's the improv side of things. Now, when I confront any kind of fear from my organizational clients, I think I if I can, toot my own horn a little bit, I think I do a good job in kind of allaying their fears. The first thing I always tell my clients, which is true in how I deliver improv to my clients, it's not true for everyone, but for me it
Hmm.
is that I say, don't worry, like no one is going to have to act. No one
Hmm.
will be performing, no one will be acting. Because in fact, like in my sessions, like the real goal and the real benefit is going to come if people in that group are being more themselves than they ever have been before in the
Hmm.
workplace.
Hmm.
So they're bringing their true selves, they're being the most authentic, they're being vulnerable, right? They're
Right.
being willing to fail and those kinds of things. So I really take special care to not force people into performing in my sessions because the goal is not to make, your marketing team really good at improv performance. Like that is
Hmm.
not the goal. Like
Right.
who cares if they can invent characters on the spot and make it
Sure.
funny, right?
Yeah.
The real goal is like giving them that experiential quality that only improv can give in letting them try on some new behaviors, some new mindsets, and
Hmm.
really learn firsthand how beneficial they can be to their work. So it's
Hmm.
much more about the application of what we're doing to their day-to-day work and how they work together as a team or what they
Hmm.
might be challenged by as individuals, and that sort of thing.
Right. And that reminds me of actually this vulnerability piece is like you give a great example on psychological safety. The
Hmm.
Ministry of Defense, I mean, they thought it's a great equalizer for Pentagon, right? And
Uh-huh.
the lady said the sticky note doesn't know if a two-star general or a private.
Yeah.
All considerations are valid.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, I've done improv sessions for the Pentagon, and you wouldn't believe, like, talk about a diversity of a group. I had people in fatigues in that room. I had people who were office managers in that room. I had people who were generals in that room. And improv is a huge, huge equalizer, right? Because
Exactly.
everyone is equal. Everyone knows zero amount of what's about to happen, and
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, thanks for picking out that quote. I read a lot of articles. I'd actually kind of forgotten about that anecdote. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, that was really, I mean, like a great one because that's exactly the atmosphere in some companies. I mean, like where their hierarchy is so visible, and
Mm,
the CEO or the head of a unit, whatever, is very I don't know, submissive, or how do you call it? I mean, like, and it's very difficult. You can see how it creates that sort of insecurity in the team.
yes. Yeah, and I think another word for insecurity, honestly, is fear, right?
Right.
So do you fear change at any kind of change, right? Or are you going to embrace productive change, right?
Hmm.
And I think kind of in most traditional workplaces, people who ascend to the upper stratosphere of that hierarchy tend to, in my opinion, ascend to that rank because they've said no. to a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
Because they
Hmm.
haven't taken risks, because they are going to toe the line and maintain the status quo. But,
Hmm.
God, in like today's world and today's economy and today's workplaces, like the status quo is not sufficient. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to embrace change, because
Sure,
sometimes change is forced on you. You don't always have a choice in the matter.
sure.
So a lot of it's about how are you going to react to it,
Hmm.
even if you're not the one fomenting it.
Hmm. Hmm. And actually, what I like most, also one of your articles, is how to avoid hiring your company's next brilliant jerk, right?
Yes.
So this is about this Google's hire for cultural fit principle,
uh-huh.
right? So
Yeah.
so that's quite an important one also. Like, how do you actually execute it? I mean, what sort of tasks do you give in order to um, check on these candidates? This is how it happens. I mean, during the interview, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So
yeah.
I definitely view putting candidates through an improv session. We'll just use a general phrase for it right now. An improv session as supplementary to your existing candidate review and assessment process. So,
Hmm.
but where I think it can be so powerful is because not only is it a behavioral style interview, but it's a behavioral style interview where you can literally observe their behavior as opposed to hear them tell you about a past experience. So
Right.
I've gone through many interviews in my life. I actually frankly love interviewing. It's always like my favorite part of a job process.
Hmm.
But the truth is that people can be very sophisticated in how they prepare for interviews.
Sure.
They can memorize stock responses to questions that they're
Right.
going to get. They can memorize answers to case studies. And so while that definitely has its role in an interview process, you're not really going to get to see the person for who they really are. And I think in today's world, it's the soft skills, it's the judgment, it's the composure, it's the grit, it is how teachable people are, how humble they are. Like
Hmm.
those are the kinds of things that are really going to stand the test of time.
Hmm.
And wouldn't it be lovely if you could assess candidates on those measures before you hire them, so that you can be pretty confident that they're not going to be that brilliant jerk, right?
Right.
They're not going
Right.
to kind of upend your company, drive other people out of your company, or God forbid, land your company in the news for not so great reasons. And so yeah, so an improv behavioral interview session can really it's very much like a simulation almost, where you create different kind of improv activities that are essentially scenarios or tasks that you put people through, and you get
Hmm.
to observe how they engage. You get to observe how they bring their true selves to that experience. And I think that can be very, very telling in some things that are so subjective that they can be very hard to really evaluate in an interview process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it works great. I mean, I can imagine. So then I had more questions, but okay, the last one, because
Okay,
we are
sure.
almost like reaching the half an hour. So this is my signature question for all the episodes. Like, say I'm asking, what is your formula for creating value? So this is like, I give myself like the example of like the elements, the components of creating value. I mean, um, like, you have these 5 things
Uh-huh.
in your exercise, this creative exercise. So
Uh-huh.
what are the key elements of creating value, you think?
Of
uh,
creating value for what, or
for
for whom?
customer, for customer,
Oh,
for company. Actually, it comes pretty much the same thing, right? What you
yeah.
create the value for customer, it's actually the value for company.
Yes, yeah, yeah, definitely. So I think that is a wonderful and very big question. So I think
Yeah.
in terms of creating value, I think, because I'm a design thinking practitioner, I my mind first goes to what are you solving for and who are you solving it for. So
Hmm.
definitely always thinking about your customer, and whether that is an internal customer, a stakeholder, or like an external customer who's buying your product. There's a lot of different ways to define and conceive of customer, but I think really that is the soil on which you're going to grow value, right? If you
Hmm.
don't know your customer, if you don't take pains and effort to know them and understand them and want to serve them, then any value you create is going to be in a vacuum and
Hmm.
maybe wasted value, right?
Right.
There's a lot of examples in this world of solutions that didn't have any problem, right? And
Right. Right.
so I think in terms of mitigating your risk of not having that happen to you, and having a better chance at creating value, it's definitely about unearthing your customers' wants, needs, desires, and really thinking about serving them.
Hmm.
Um, and trying to think of them before you're thinking about the constraints of your business or the constraints of the technology that you have or the constraints of your people, and starting with that, what could be possible kind of lens.
Right.
So
Right.
that would be my yeah.
Scarcity lens. Right.
Yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like thinking
Yeah.
with a bit more abundance at the start of the
Yeah.
process. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Well, Coonoor, I mean, thank you very much again, and
Yeah.
I will put the links to your great articles in Medium. I mean, in the show notes,
Oh, thank you.
and how people can find you other than if they come to Seattle,
Yeah.
how they can find you on internet.
Oh, that'd be so great. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. And please let me know, would you mind when this is posted, would you please mind sending me and Taylor, my admin, just like the links to everything? Because we'd also love to share it with
Sure.
people and promote it on social media and that kind
Oh,
of thing.
I'll be honored. Of course, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for thinking of me for this. It's a real privilege and pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for spending your time, and I think you'll have more fans in Turkey right now.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. What time is it there actually?
Well, actually, it's like 11, 10 past 11
Oh, okay. You
p.m.
should go to
in the
sleep. You
night.
should go to sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It was great chatting with you again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
So
Bye.